Whole wheat or white bread? It's a question you've probably been asked while your face was pressed against a Subway sneeze guard. And if you're a health-conscious consumer, chances are you opted for whole grain over white bread. And why wouldn't you? Decades of marketing has informed us that the grainy brown stuff is a whole lot better for us than its bright white counterpart. But is that wholly the case? Or are we not being told the whole truth? Today, we're separating the wheat from the chaff on whether or not whole wheat bread is really better for you than white bread. But first, make sure you subscribe to the Weird History Food channel and let us know in the comments below which alleged health food you would like us to investigate next time. Okay, ready for the greatest thing since sliced bread? To know which delicious carb is better for us, we first have to understand why they're different in the first place. For one thing, whole wheat bread is significantly older. Its history is tied directly to the cultivation of wheat as a crop, beginning around 12,000 years ago in a place called the Fertile Crescent. While that might sound like a trendy bakery, it's actually the name given to a section of the Middle East, which is nestled snugly between the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf. Back then, bread was viewed as a staple food. It was nutritious, calorically heavy, and made up a thick hunk of the average person's diet. The flour was hand-ground, and it included the entire wheat kernel, which consists of three parts: the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. Or, in other words, these early bread makers used the whole wheat in their flour. That flour was then moistened and kneaded into various forms. But all those forms were dark brown, dense, and flat. We wouldn't get light and fluffy bread until around 6,000 years later, thanks to the ancient Egyptians. They were the first people to use fermentation in their baking, resulting in what we know as leavened bread, a combination of flour, water, and yeast. They were the ones who also discovered that you don't have to utilize every part of your wheat. Using hand sieves, ancient Egyptians were able to separate the three parts of a wheat kernel, and by discarding the bran and germ, they could use just the endosperm to create a bread that was lighter in color with a milder flavor. And thus, white bread was born. Or baked. Either way, there was a bun in the oven. Unfortunately, the process of creating white bread was far more laborious than regular whole wheat bread. Separating the three parts of the wheat kernel and waiting for the bread to rise took significantly more time. And even in ancient Egypt, time was money. This meant that only the wealthy were able to dine on white bread, and it was typically a side dish for a more robust meal. Meanwhile, the common folk were stuck with good old-fashioned whole wheat. And if you were on an even lower societal rung, well, you wouldn't be eating any wheat at all. Instead, your bread would be made from barley or other grain. This made white bread somewhat of a status symbol, and that attitude continued to ferment across various cultures. In ancient Greece, bread made from wheat was only permitted to be baked for feast days, and white bread was an especially rare commodity. In medieval Europe, bread became such an expected part of a meal that it was brought out along with the silverware. But still, only the wealthy were able to afford white bread, even as water-powered mills were constructed, which used the kinetic energy of a body of water to grind flour. While wheat cultivation and bread making quickly spread across the world, one of the latest adopters was America. It took until the early 16th century, when Spain brought the crop over to Mexico, for things to really start heating up. After the discovery of the New World, European settlers were quick to bring their own stores of wheat to the east coast of North America, and quite suddenly, wheat farms were popping up everywhere. With the invention of improved farming and cooking equipment, as well as the construction of railroads across America, wheat and wheat-based bread became more easily obtainable, but white bread was still annoyingly strenuous to make. That problem wouldn't be solved until the Industrial Revolution, when machine manufacturing created more efficient ways to harvest wheat, separate its three core elements, and grind it down. Water-powered mills gave way to steam-powered ones, and then to mechanical roller mills. White bread quickly evolved from a symbol of wealth to a symbol of industry, a decadent treat made commonplace. At least for middle-class American families, since white bread still required complex machinery to make, it remained too expensive for the poorest of the poor. For the most part, local bakeries were still making whole wheat bread, since they didn't have access to fancy industrial machines. And since these local shops were often owned and operated by immigrants, biased attitudes of the time created the stigma that the bread was dirty and low class. Factories, on the other hand, were thought to be shiny, clean establishments supplements. Oh, to be so naive. White bread, too, was perceived as cleaner than whole wheat simply by virtue of being white. And another contributor to white bread's clean reputation was that it remained shelf-stable for much longer, due to the lack of natural germ oils and factory-made white flour. All of this helped white bread surge in popularity, but it still hadn't quite risen to its full potential. In 1928, American engineer Otto Rohwedder invented the first machine that could automatically slice and bag a loaf of bread. 2 years later, in 1930, White Wonder Bread became the first commercially sold pre-sliced loaf on the market, and it only cemented the popularity of white bread in the minds of the public. With its simple flavor profile, sliced white bread became popular as a vehicle for condiments. It was ubiquitous as the foundational layer for any good sandwich, grilled cheese, or morning toast with your choice of spread. But as the years wore on, competition in the food space began to stiffen. More and more sliced bread, white or otherwise, started to populate store shelves. And as with anything that used to be cool, white bread slowly lost its positive reputation. It was time for whole wheat to rise again. The whole wheat bread resurgence began in earnest in the 1960s and 70s, but the seeds for whole wheat's comeback were actually planted over 100 years earlier. In the 1830s, health reformist Sylvester Graham was passionately anti-white bread. He thought the color could more easily hide additives, chalk, clay, and plaster, which would make the loaves appear more robust without adding any additional nutritional benefits. Then, in the 1930s, men's fitness icon Bernard McFadden went on record to say that eating white bread made him ill. He warned against ingesting the stuff, as he believed it made you somehow weaker, both morally and physically. And while Graham and McFadden both had some wild ideas, they weren't totally off the mark. In the 1940s, food scientists had discovered that white bread was, in fact, less nutritious than whole wheat. Stricter regulations around food production were put in place, and white bread manufacturers were forced to add additional vitamins and minerals into their products through a process called fortification. But for many, the damage was done. Working in tandem with white bread's downfall and a push for New Age beliefs surrounding health and wellness, the 1960s and 70s saw an upswing in whole wheat bread consumption. Not only was it seen as healthier, but culturally, America's concerns over immigrant bakers were less prominent, and a growing number of people were turning away from factory food towards so-called natural alternatives. Around this time, the macrobiotic diet became popular with a hippie counterculture movement. It stressed plant-based and whole grain eating, and the industry took notice. Although in retrospect, it's a little weird to target a demographic which famously doesn't have any money. Companies started marketing towards this growing trend. Artisanal whole wheat bread became a new luxury food item. They leaned into an ingredients-first approach, advertising their 100% whole wheat status on the bag, and adding images of wheat stalks to their packaging to evoke that all-natural vibe. White bread, on the other hand, became associated with the working and lower classes. The reputations of the two rival loaves had been flipped. In 1979, Dr. Dennis Burkitt published a book called Don't Forget Fiber in Your Diet, which obviously argued for the importance of eating a lot of fibrous foods. He believed that a high-fiber diet would limit the risk of colorectal cancer, and those beliefs were deeply influential on American consumers. Even though white bread had been adding in additional nutrients for decades, one thing they weren't adding was fiber, something whole wheat bread was naturally richer in. So, whole wheat bread had been branded a cool, healthy, hippie food, and a scientifically backed superfood. It rose in esteem and price. Meanwhile, the once royal white bread had been dethroned and cast aside. But did it really deserve it? Is whole wheat bread really that much better for you? Well, in a word, yes. Removing 2/3 of the wheat kernel while sifting white flour removes much of the bread's nutritional value. Consequently, white bread contains only half of the magnesium in whole wheat bread and is lacking in calcium, fiber, iron, vitamin B, various micronutrients, and essential fatty acid. Before the industrialization of milling, the loss was slightly less noticeable. Manual flour grinding wasn't a perfect system, so often other bits of the wheat kernel and traces of germ oil would make it through to the finished loaf. With modern technology, that's no longer a consideration. The 1940s fortification regulations helped to add back some of those necessary nutrients, but not all of them. While most modern white breads add in iron, niacin, riboflavin, and thiamine, they still aren't fibrous. More recent research has confirmed Dr. Burkitt's hypothesis about the link between a high-fiber diet and lowered cancer risks. Scientists also found that fiber can support good bone and skin health as well as lower the risk of diabetes and heart disease. However, not every bag is baked equal. Most whole wheat bread today is still factory-made. Some artisanal breads are filled with additional salt or sugar for taste. And if the ingredients say it includes enriched wheat flour, then it means the whole wheat flour is being cut with the less nutritious white to make the bread lighter, fluffier, and last longer. Though that might not always be a bad thing. There are circumstances in which someone might prefer white bread beyond just the taste. For example, many people with irritable bowel syndrome may want to avoid excess fiber in their diets, in which case, white bread is a great alternative, unless you want to cut every trip to the deli extremely short. What might be even better is foregoing wheat-based bread altogether. Dietitian Jill Weisenberger argues that cereal, crackers, and pasta give us plenty of wheat in our diets, and it might be better to explore other grains for your bread. Rye has been proven to help lower cholesterol, while sourdough is great for anyone watching their blood sugar. Both have seen a spike in interest recently, with sourdough becoming especially popular during the COVID-19 pandemic, when everyone was stuck inside and baking bread for some reason. What happened there? Still, wheat remains king, especially whole wheat. Sales of whole wheat bread have been rising consistently for years, while sales of white bread have been in steady decline. Unless there's another bread revolution, that doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. But there's no telling when the next bread war will be waged. Those carbs really sneak up on you. So what do you think? Is whole wheat worth the hype, or are you sticking with Wonder Bread? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other weird history food videos.